So let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Ridge, the Vice President of the New Jersey Humanist Network. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are for today's program with Brian Regal. I want to do the next slide, Brenda. So this is how things are going to go today. And right now, I'm going to give you some Zoom tips. Hopefully everybody knows, everybody's a Zoom expert by this time, but if you want to get the speaker view, then you know to go up into the right-hand corner where it says view, and you click on that and you can pick speaker. I would ask that you keep things muted during the presentation. There'll be time for questions, and after that, please be respectful and appropriate in the chat, and always mute any background noise if that should come up where you are. New Jersey Humanist Network is a secular humanist community founded in 1994. The non-theistic philosophy or life stance of secular humanism embraces human reason, ethics, and social justice, and philosophical naturalism, affirming that we have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape our own lives. We're committed to the application of reason and science to our understanding of the universe and our solutions to problems through compassion, our common experience, and civic engagement. We support progressive ideals and encourage lifelong learning and respect for the natural world and our human diversity. We host a variety of programs and activities that support our educational, political, and social goals. We're based in Somerset County in New Jersey and have members throughout the state. Our goal is to connect New Jerseyans with a humanist group in their area or help build one. We hold monthly programs like today's. Pre-pandemic, those were held at the Franklin Township Public Library in Somerset, but we've been holding them virtually on Zoom since 2020. We hope to return to in-person meetings at the library once they reopen their community outside groups. Hopefully that will be soon, maybe later in the year. We have just restarted our monthly dinner at the Omega Diner in North Brunswick on third Tuesdays, and our virtual diner that we've been holding will continue on second Tuesdays. We also have a book club that meets on fourth Thursdays and an exploring humanism course that meets first Sundays. These are all held in the evenings, and we'll have more info on those in a minute. Every year we have a summer picnic, which will also be in person this year in August, and a winter celebration in December that we call Human Life. We'll show you where you can find us on social media, and you can find information about all of our activities on our website at njhn.org. If this is your first meeting with us, thanks for checking us out today. If you're here every or almost every month, thanks for being part of our humanist community. We are a 501c3 nonprofit educational membership organization. Our members' annual dues help fund all our programs and activities, and we hope you'll join us as we support and promote human values in New Jersey. Okay, so Brenda, next, I think I want to talk about our upcoming events. So this Exploring Humanism course, which is we're sort of following along from some guides that we have found through the American Humanist Association. We've been just exploring and discussing various aspects of humanism. We're taking a break in July, but we'll come back on July 7th with our part 2 of psychology and humanism. Also, our virtual diner on second Tuesdays, the next one will be July 12th. That's not on this slide. And our July 24th, it'll be a virtual meeting. It's still in the planning stages, but we're going to host another arts showcase of our members' creative talents. We're going to invite you to share your music, painting, drawing, quilting, knitting, photography, gardening, writing, poetry, woodworking, sculpting, scrapbooking, or whatever inspires your happiness and creativity. We'll get the full details out on that soon, so start thinking about showing us what you've got. For our July book club, we'll be reading and discussing An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And you can, again, find more details on all of these on our website. Okay, next, Brenda. So this is where you'll find information about becoming an NJHN member. You can see we have different levels there. And membership benefits, let me just tell you quickly about membership benefits. First of all, you get an NJHN magnet for your fridge or your car. You get a $5 discount on all paid events. You get voting rights on elections and bylaws and corporate changes and other issues. Eventually, we will have some member-only events pretty soon, and then because we think our members deserve some special events. And then we'll offer community support when it's needed and when we can. And then you'll find us here on Facebook, Meetup, Twitter, YouTube, and again, there's our website. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you can talk to me. You can send me a message. You can email me at njhn.org@gmail.com. Okay, Brenda, next. So we're going to start the program. Next slide. There was another slide. Oh, well. So I'm going to introduce Brian Regal. Dr. Brian Regal is an associate professor of history of science, technology, and medicine at Kean University, where he teaches classes on science and medical history, as well as pseudoscience, alchemy, and book history. His talk today, Waiting for Columbus, Who Really Discovered America, is based on his new book just published in this May, titled The Battle Over America's Origins, Legends, Amateurs, and Professional Historiographers. He is also the author of The Secret History of the Jersey Devil, How Quakers, Hucksters, and Benjamin Franklin Created a Monster, written with his co-author and Kean University professor, Dr. Frank J. Esposito, and Searching for Sasquatch, Crackpots, Eggheads, and Cryptozoology. His earlier works include Henry Fairfield Osborn, Race and the Search for the Origins of Man, and Pseudoscience, a critical encyclopedia. Yes. He has appeared on the History Channel and Science Channel talking about monsters in the series True Monsters and Mythical Beasts, and 2021's Hulu special Sasquatch. He was an invited panel speaker at Comic-Con, New York City in 2018 and 2021, and an NBC TV special on Harry Potter and alchemy. He has written numerous articles and op-ed pieces for which he is regularly yelled at on comment sections and social media. Brian has spoken to our group 5 times in the past, the last time in February 2020, just before the world we knew was about to change forever. So we're very glad to have him back with us today. Please welcome back Dr. Brian Regal.
Thank you. Should
Okay.
I can put up my screen now?
Yep, Brenda will. There you go.
Okay, let's see. Share screen. Okay, there we are. Can you, am I coming through okay, voice-wise?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for having me. Thanks to everybody who's here. As an academic, to get 18 people to show up to a panel, that's like Woodstock. That's a huge crowd. That's a, they got to put up barriers. That's such a huge crowd. But I want to thank everybody for showing up to listen to me yammer on for a while about this. Uh, the genesis of this project was when I was doing my doctoral dissertation, which was in the late 90s. Um, I'm one of those historians who suffers from the disease of being interested in 100 different things at the same time. And one of the ideas I'd had for uh, writing my doctoral dissertation is what wound up being Searching for Sasquatch some years later. But I didn't submit that as my idea because I didn't think the university would let me write about monsters for my doctorate. Then I thought about this and I said, well, they're probably not going to let me write about that either. And so that's when I sort of settled on Henry Fairfield Osborn and evolution and religious fundamentalism. And that kind of made them happy. So I was able to get that out of the way. So this project, this book, is the product of genesis of about 20 years worth of sort of mostly just thinking about it, but then about 5 years worth of writing and traveling to archives and things. Uh, one of the one of the ideas that kind of links all my work together is this idea of the relationship between professional scholars and amateur investigators. And this topic here of who really discovered America really allows for an examination of this topic because there's lots of pseudo history out there, pseudo archaeology, pseudoscience, all the sort of stuff I'm really interested in. So it allowed me to sort of crowbar about a dozen different ideas into one project. And let's see if I can get this thing to go forward. There we go. Okay. So let me tear the Band-Aid off right now. Christopher Columbus does not discover America. You can't discover a place if when you show up, there's already people there watching you show up. So that kind of, takes the discovery bit out of it. So then who discovered America? The answer is really actually pretty simple. The ancestors of the Native Americans, they discovered America. They were the first humans here. When they showed up, there was nobody waiting for them. And so you have to give them credit. And the archaeological evidence seems to suggest that the first humans arrive here in what we now call the Americas somewhere roughly between 15 and 30,000 years ago. There are some controversial sites around the hemisphere that suggest maybe 40,000 years ago. That's a whole other conversation, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. And we're in New Jersey, and there were quite a few Native people here already. I put this list together, and keep in mind, this is just the Northeast. This isn't all of the Americas. So you have the Lenni Lenapes, the Canarsies, the Hackensacks, the Massachusetts, the Manhattans, the Narragansetts, the Wampanoags, the Mohegans, the Montaukes, the Appalachies. And, again, this is just a fairly short list of the various different Native American groups that were already here by the time Europeans start showing up. Now, here's the guy that everybody, we think of who discovered America. Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. The problem with that is it's very problematic. Columbus shows up here in 1492. He's not looking to come here. When I was a kid going to school, and I'm sure a lot of you can say the same thing, Columbus was always sort of framed as he was looking for America. He's not looking for America at all. He's looking for a fast and easy way to get to Asia, to get to the Orient, what at the time Europeans called Cathay, or India, because they thought that if you could get to Asia, Europeans were already going to Asia relatively small numbers, but there were really only two ways to get there. You could go overland, which required you to go through the Muslim Empire, and Christian Muslim relations weren't any better back then than they are now. So that was kind of dangerous. You could sail down around the Cape of Africa and then come up. That was faster, but that was really dangerous because making that turn around what is now South Africa was pretty risky. So what Columbus wants to do, he has been reading a lot of books about Asia, about going through the Middle East, and he thinks, well, if we just travel west, we can come up around the other side, and it'll be faster. This myth that Columbus somehow thought the Earth was flat, that's just a myth. A lot of the stuff that people think they know about Columbus is wrong. And most of that comes not from Columbus, but from Washington Irving. When Irving writes his biography of Columbus, which becomes hugely influential, it's an interesting book because Irving goes to Spain. He learns to read Spanish so he can read the original doc. He does what we historians teach our students to do all the time: look for the primary documents. He's not really a historian. He's a novelist, but he decides to go to Spain and he's looking at all this material. But for Irving, that isn't exciting enough. So he just starts making stuff up. And so that whole Earth is flat thing, the mutinous crew, all that stuff is pretty much Washington Irving deciding that the actual story isn't exciting enough, so he's got to spice it up a little bit. So Columbus comes here. He's trying to get to Asia. He crashes into the Caribbean. He goes most of his life after this thinking he's in Asia. What most people don't realize is Columbus doesn't come here once. He actually comes here 4 times. He gets here, he goes back, he comes back, and he goes back and forth. And through all of that, he still insists he's in Asia. On his deathbed, he insists he's in Asia. People tried to tell him, Admiral, you made it to this place that nobody knew about. And he says, no, you're crazy. I was in Asia. Were you there? You weren't there. I was there. I knew I was in Asia. So enough with this New World stuff. And one of the interesting things, this is all I'm really going to do about Columbus. I'm going to get onto other stuff here, but I just wanted to kind of get some of this Columbus stuff out of the way. The way Columbus is viewed, especially here in North America, is really interesting because it changes over time. And remember, Columbus never gets to North America. He sort of, stumbles around the Caribbean for a while, never really gets to the mainland, never knows North America's even here. And so eventually what happens is his reputation sort of goes in and out of favor from time to time. In the 1600s, in colonial America, if you'd have asked somebody about Christopher Columbus, they would have said, who? And he was really not discussed that much. Nobody really cared whether he discovered America or not. By the time of the Revolution, it starts to change because, well, okay, yeah, Columbus is the first one here, but at least he's not English. We don't have to deal with that. We don't have to worry about him working for the guys we just threw out of here in the Revolution. This is around the time things slowly start getting named after him. It's only a little trickle at first. It'll become a flood later on, but at first, this is around the time when stuff starts getting named after Columbus. By the 1800s, he now has sort of a bad reputation because he's Catholic. And in North America in the 19th century, there's this huge anti-Catholic movement where people burn down convents and, all the stuff that horrible, conspiracy theorists say today about Jews or Muslims, they used to say about Catholics. It's an awful religion. They don't really want to be good Americans. They don't understand democracy. Now, what's interesting about this is he's not disliked because he's a slaver. He's disliked because he's Catholic. slavery is not a problem because in 19th century America, slavery is not a problem. So that isn't really something that people sort of hold him accountable for. By the 20th century, it starts to change again. Uh, Statues start going up. Now people say, yeah, okay, yeah, slavery, he doesn't really, he thinks he's in Asia, but at least he's not German. So that's one good thing he's got going for him. By the 21st century, now we're in the current phase. He's terrible. He's a slaver, and now all those statues that they used to put up to him now start getting pulled down. And so I'm sure there will be a point in the future where yet another phase of this will come about. Uh, and one of the things we have to remember about Columbus and this period of discovery, we call it the Age of Discovery, we know this stuff from very little information. There's a tiny little handful of letters from Columbus. If you go to, if you go on Amazon, you go to a bookstore, you can buy the logbook of Christopher Columbus, and it's very interesting, most of which is just made up. It really has no bearing on his actual logbook, what was called a diario, which he gives to Isabella when he gets back, and she sticks it in the vaults, and you never see it again. It's never been found. His original copy has never been found. It's likely, misfiled somewhere within the Spanish state archives. His son Ferdinand writes the first major biography of his dad. That's what you're looking at here in Spanish. And even this we don't have the original manuscript. Ferdinand was an avid book collector, and he helps begin modern libraryship. He's one of the first people in the modern world, at least, to start creating card catalogs for libraries so that you could find things easier. Up until that point, libraries there were attempts to organize this stuff, but it wasn't exactly user friendly. And so Ferdinand's attempt to catalog his own library of books is what kind of leads to the modern form of library catalogs, libraryship. Now we also have Amerigo Vespucci, who's also problematic. The legend of Vespucci also doesn't really jive with the reality. He was not really a sailor. He was sort of a come-along guy. He was an investor who had the chance to go on a couple of trips to the Western Hemisphere, and he goes basically to keep an eye on his investments. And when he gets back, like Columbus, he writes a series of letters describing what he's done, most of which get lost. And so we don't really know for sure. There's about 6 or 8 letters which are attributed to Vespucci. Scholars really only accept maybe 3 or 4 of them as genuine. The most important one of Vespucci's letters, in which he supposedly uses for the first time the term New World, is also spurious. We don't think that's genuine. Why that's important is because that letter, a copy of it, winds up in the hands of some geographers in France who are sort of forward thinking, and they're trying to create books on what the universe is really all about and use cutting edge research and cutting edge knowledge. And a couple of these guys, Martin Waldseemüller and Matthias Ringman, you got to say these with outrageous German accents. And they decide they want to create a map, a world map, that incorporates this new information that's coming out of this guy Columbus and this other guy Vespucci. And so they put together what you're looking at here. This is the 1507 map. And they decide, since most of the information they're relying on for this strip here down the left side comes from Amerigo Vespucci, they get the idea, let's call it America. And so this map you're looking at here, this is the 1507 map. This is the first time the word America is seen anywhere. And the map is really popular and it sells out. It gets so popular that it's being used in schools and things, and the people who have them basically wear them out. And so most of the original copies get lost. There's only a couple of copies of this still lying around. When Waldseemüller and Ringman go to put out sort of the second edition, they've had second thoughts about this. And the second edition of this map doesn't contain the word America, because they're beginning to wonder that these letters from Vespucci, they may not be kosher, so let's sort of avoid that and just take the word America off here. But by then the damage is done. The genie's out of the bottle, and other cartographers start using the word America, and so there's really no getting around it. So we call it America from there on. So then, with all this buildup, the answers to the native people are the ones who really discover America, but that's not who I'm going to talk about. That's not really who the book is about. My book is about this whole world of alternate pre-Columbian discovery theories. As I showed before, there are all these reasons for different groups to not accept Columbus. Nobody really accepts the native people because, racism and their native people. We don't want to say they discovered this place, so they just get pushed out completely. But Columbus also kind of winds up in the back, and you get this whole list of other candidates who I call the accused, for who really discovered America. And this list you're looking at here: Vikings, Prince Madoc, Portuguese fishermen, Chinese explorers, African adventurers. That's also a very short list. You can basically make a list of every ancient culture, every ancient society, every ancient empire, and throw a dart at it. And anyone it hits, people say that is the group that found America. There are people who claim the Romans discovered America, the Carthaginians. There are those who believe that the king of Mali discovered America. There are stories about Chinese explorers, Admiral Hen Shi and the Buddhist monk Wei Shen. You almost can't throw a rock without hitting some ancient society who has followers who say they're the ones who really discovered America. And so we could go on I could do basically each month do a talk here, and cover a different group each time and never say the same thing twice. That's how many legends about who really discovered America there is. So I'm going to focus today on everybody's favorite, the Vikings. The problem with the Vikings is there really weren't Vikings. The word Viking is something which is developed in the 19th century, in the way that Washington Irving sort of creates this myth of Columbus. Richard Wagner creates the myth of the Vikings. These guys with the helmets, with the horns, and all of that. Those characters never really existed. There's no evidence that the Vikings wore helmets with horns on them. That sort of character is really a kind of creation of pop culture. Now, not the problem, but one of the things that complicates the Viking story, and I'm just going to use the word Viking because you can say Norse explorers, Norse pirates, any of those are fine. But one of the things that complicates the story about the Vikings and the discovery of America is we now know that Norse explorers did get to North America. In the 1960s, an archaeological site was discovered up in Newfoundland called Lansom Meadow, that was clearly a Norse site. Norse objects were discovered. A Norse settlement was discovered, and this dates back to around the 1000s. Recent radiometric dating has been done again on this site. I mean, when I say recent, I mean within the last couple of years, which confirms that this was a Norse site. So the Norse did get here before Columbus. I don't say the Norse were here first. One of the things you have to keep in mind when you're studying the past is that we often love to use the expression, they were the first, or they were the only, or we have to be careful of that. What I say about the Norse is that they're the earliest we know of. We may find out that people got here before them, and maybe the Norse were actually the first Europeans to come here, but we don't really know that for sure. And so, but also, this is not the story I'm going to talk about. These are the real Norse people who come to North America. I'm going to talk about the mythical, legendary Norse who come here. And these involve here is the dramatis personae, Eric the Red, Barney Herlufsen, Leif Erikson, and this story comes out of the 980s. It comes out of a medieval Icelandic manuscript, that collection of little stories that's known collectively as the Vinland sagas. The problem with the Vinland sagas is it's one tiny part of a much larger medieval Icelandic history. It's like the whole story of Atlantis. The Atlantis story appears in Plato's book, but it's basically a small chapter in a much larger work, and that's kind of what the Vinland sagas are. It's basically a small chapter out of a much larger work of Icelandic and Greenland history. We're not sure if any of these people are real. They only seem to appear in the Greenland. I'm sorry, in the Vinland sagas. They might have been real, but we don't really know. And so it starts off with this guy Eric the Red, who is living in Iceland, but he kills a guy, and he kills the guy because the guy he kills killed one of his slaves. What most people don't know about Viking Norse culture, it was a slave culture. And what'll happen in years later, people here in the United States who will want to kind of make the Vikings seem like these sort of proto-democratic Republicans who come here for liberty and freedom. And they sort of ignore that whole, well, yeah, but they were slavers sort of thing. It's like when people get all worked up about the Spartans, they completely ignore the fact that the Spartans were horrible human beings who enslaved people, who murdered, local peasants. They really weren't nice guys at all. So Eric leaves and he comes to Greenland. He starts a settlement there. Then a kind of family friend named Barney Herlufsen decides to come and live with them. So he's sailing from Iceland to Greenland, and he gets lost. And he's kind of wandering around, and he sees land west of Greenland. He doesn't actually go there, he just sees it. He eventually figures out where he is, and he gets to Greenland, and everything's fine. And then he tells Eric and Eric's son, Leif, about this landmass he sees. One of the things which I love about this story is that the idea that the first person to see North America is named Barney. I don't know why, but it just sort of tickles me. The first guy to actually see North America is a Viking named Barney. So Barney tells Leif. Leif decides to go looking for this, and he famously he lands there. He doesn't like the first place he lands. He calls that Hello Land, and then he heads south. It's kind of like Goldilocks and Three Bears. They keep looking for a good place, and each place they wind up is a little bit better than the one before. They head south. They find another. They land at another place. He calls that Markland. They head south again, and they find kind of a really nice place. He calls that Vinland. And that's in part because supposedly they find vines growing, grapes growing. There's this wonderful story about Leif's godfather, a German guy named Tyrker, who wanders away from the group, and they don't know where he is. They start freaking out because where's Tyrker? Where's Tyrker? Where's my godfather? And they finally find him like lying under a tree drunk because he's been eating these grapes, and apparently they got him drunk real fast. And so they call this place Vinland. Now, two of the characters which are less well known, I just mentioned them here because they're interesting, is Leif's brother Torvald and his sister Freydis. Torvald gets into a fight with some Native Americans who they call Skraelings, and he gets killed. He gets shot with an arrow by the Native Americans. Freydis, who is Leif's sister, she's the first European woman mentioned in any texts about North America. If we accept the Vinland sagas as authentic, or as authentic as we can get, she's the first European female to be mentioned. And there's another guy also named Torvald, who brings his girlfriend and his wife over, and they start a little farm, and they have a child named Snorri. And if this story is accurate, then Snorri Herlufsson is the first European born in North America. Not her name just flew right out of my head. I have a PhD in history. Now I can't remember it. Someone help me out here. Oh well, I'll think of it as time goes along. But if the Vinland saga is correct, Snorri Herlufsson is the first European born in North America. Now here we have a picture of the actual Vinland sagas. They exist in one copy, and written by a guy named Adam of Bremen, who was writing again this sort of larger story of Icelandic and Greenland history. And so you can see this. It still exists. It's in Copenhagen, and you can look at it. And it's a typical medieval manuscript, illuminated manuscript. If you've seen any European medieval illuminated manuscript, you've seen the Vinland sagas, because that's what they look like. As time goes by, however, the story is really only known within Scandinavian culture. It hasn't really gotten out. It starts to get known to the wider world in 1705 when Icelandic historian Tormod Torfius publishes his Historia Vinlandi. You can see the first page right here. And he's the first person in print to suggest that Vinland is North America. Up until that time, even people who had read the Vinland sagas, the problem with the Vinland sagas, as it is for most ancient texts, is it seems like it's detailed on the surface, but when you really look at it, it's not detailed at all. You really couldn't. Torfius sort of takes an imaginative leap to say that the Vinland sagas, that Vinland is North America. It gets really well known in the 1830s when another Scandinavian historian named Carl Christian Raffin decides that this story needs to be known to the wider world, especially in America. And so he takes the Vinland sagas, he has facsimile copies made, and he translates part of it into Latin, part of it into Scandinavian or Norwegian, part of it into English, and it publishes it as this big fat tome called the Antiquitates Americanae, which comes out in 1837. And this is really the first time that this story becomes accessible to the English-speaking world, and particularly in America. And it slowly starts getting picked up here in North America, and people start looking at it and deciding this. Here's the story of how the Vikings really discovered America. Now, one of our main characters here is this guy on the right. I love his hat. This is Eben Norton Horsford. They don't name people the way they used to anymore. You don't find people with names like Eben Norton Horsford anymore. 1818 to 1893. He's a really interesting guy. He's a chemist who teaches chemistry at Harvard. And as many scientists do, later in his career, he decides he's now a historian as well. He has no training as a historian, no training as a linguist. He just decides one day he's going to be a historian, and he's going to write. He hears stories from this guy Ole Bull, who's a famous Norwegian violinist who's really popular throughout Europe, throughout England, and North America. And Horsford meets him, and Ole Bull starts telling him these stories about Leif Erikson, and Horsford is just transfixed. He becomes obsessed with this. And Horsford decides he is going to prove that Leif Erikson discovered America. Now, on the left here, you see this statue. This is the famous statue of Leif Erikson, which is in Boston, which is still there to this day. You can still go see it. It's still in the original site. And you'll notice that the statue doesn't look like the kind of stereotype Viking. He's sort of slender. He's more athletic. He's more David as opposed to Goliath. He doesn't have the helmet with the horns on it. He's sort of looking into the future. Very sort of forward looking. He's a thoughtful explorer rather than a rampaging corsair, which is the typical view of Vikings. Horsford writes voluminously on the subject. He puts out these lavishly illustrated books that are really expensive, even in his day, with fold-out maps and the tissue paper and photographs. And in all of that, he absolutely refuses to use the term Viking. He always uses the term Norse or Northmen because he doesn't accept that stereotype view of who the Vikings were. And so he's really a major player in spreading this Vikings discovered America thing. And he is the guy who sort of gets the public relations juggernaut going to create this statue. He gets this woman, sculptress who was fairly popular at the time, to do this, and he tells her, I don't want the big muscled Viking. I want something a little more realistic. And so she comes up with this. And when the statue goes up in the 1890s, local wags and newspaper commenters and op-ed pieces start coming out about this, and they all sort of make these sort of sly insults about the statue of Leif Erikson looking like a female. And some people said that, excuse me, that the woman who made the statue modeled it on herself. Some say that she modeled it on Ole Bull, who was kind of a slender guy. And so not everybody was really happy with this because it kind of went against the stereotype of the muscle bulging, fur covered, horn helmeted Viking. Now, Horsford does a couple of things. Because he's wealthy, he is the guy who Horsford is one of the pioneers of industrial foods. He studies in Germany with a guy named Liebig, who is very important. If you know anything about the history of sort of corporate chemistry, you know Justus Liebig's name, and Horsford was a student of his. And Horsford spends most of his time as a chemist improving various food processes. He's one of the first people to be able to figure out how to make food that you can package so that Union soldiers during the Civil War can carry food with them into battle and it won't go bad. He doesn't invent baking powder, but he creates the modern form of baking powder. So if any of you are, cooks, bakers, and you use baking powder for anything, you can thank Eben Norton Horsford for it because he's the guy who kind of develops it. He's got a ton of food baking related patents. He becomes very wealthy. He marries into a wealthy Boston family. He's got tons of money. He starts cranking out kids. His wife dies. And so he does the only thing he can do in such a situation. He marries the dead wife's sister. And then produces more kids. Um, but he decides that when Leif Erikson comes to North America, Vinland is Boston, which kind of works out nicely because that's where he lives. And he lives in Cambridge, uh, not the Cambridge of England, the Cambridge the suburb of Boston. And not only does Horsford figure out that Leif Erikson lands first in Boston, he decides that when he does, he travels up the Charles River. If you look at this map, the blue streak here, this is the Charles River, that he gets to about here, makes landfall, and builds a house. So this spot right here, right off Route 3, near the Elliott Bridge, if if you know Boston at all, Memorial Drive is this major highway that runs through the city of Boston. Eben Norton Horsford figures out that this is where Leif Erikson builds his house. And so again, it works out kind of nice because it's just a few miles where from Horsford lives. And so, that's what it makes him feel good. So if you go to Boston, if you're of a mind to, you can go visit Leif's house. There's nothing there. It's just, some grass near the Charles River. Most people don't even realize this anymore. Although eventually what happens is that Horsford decides to put up a memorial and he builds a tower. He has a tower built that looks like a giant chess piece. The rook, the castle from a chessboard. It looks like that, but sort of 30, 40 feet tall. Because the third thing that Horsford does is there is this long mythology. We don't normally associate lost cities with North America. But there is a North American lost city called Norumbega, which is mythological. It appears on a couple of early maps. Everybody who thinks it's real thinks it's in Maine off the Penobscot River. But again, even Norton Horsford decides he's found where Norumbega really is, and it's not far from where Leif Erikson's house was. And it's sort of a Xanadu kind of thing where there's, this great civilization, everybody's wealthy, and there are benevolent kings, and 10, 15,000 people live there. And of course, there's not a scrap of evidence that any of this is there. But that's the other thing that Horsford says, I found Norumbega. And so he puts up this giant chess piece, which is still there. And apparently it's a place where teenagers go to make out and smoke pot. Because it's kind of off the beaten trail. You sort of have to know where it is, and it's a place where people hang out. But as years go by, Horsford is trying to get people to believe that he has found not only Norumbega, but where Leif's house is. Now, I said before, Horsford has a bunch of kids. His first wife dies. He marries the wife's sister. He marries his sister-in-law. And he produces one more child, and that's Cornelia, who you're looking at right here, looking fabulous in a riding outfit. Cornelia, better known as Nellie, she's sort of the apple of her father's eye. And nobody else in the family takes this Viking stuff seriously, but she does. And she sort of picks up. She becomes her father's librarian, archivist, advisor, confidant. It's a relationship that almost sort of borders on the weird, a little overly close for a dad and his daughter. But again, different times back then. But he starts getting old. The 1890s, he's getting old. He gets sick. And on New Year's Eve, 1893, he's on his deathbed. The whole family is there. Everybody's everybody's crying because he's about to die. And there's the crowd around his bed, and he can barely speak. And he says to the wife, "Where's Nellie?" And so she pushes her way through the crowd, and she sits there, and this really sort of sweet, sad scene where they're holding hands, and he says, "You have to do something for me. You have to promise me something." And she says, whatever you want, I'll do it. He says, "I want you to prove I was right. Prove that I was right about Leif Erikson discovering America." And then he dies. And so she spends most of the rest of her life, and she's in her early 30s when this happens, trying to prove that her father was right. She calls in archaeologists, she calls in surveyors, she calls in historians. She has no little formal education, but because she's rich and comes from an influential Boston Brahmin family, she gets invited to archaeological conferences and scholarly meetings where most women at the time weren't even allowed into these things. She gets to give papers, because she can use her position, her physical appearance, her charm to get involved in this and be able to promote her father's ideas. She finds an artifact that is since lost called the Weston Stone from Weston, Massachusetts, that supposedly is a rune stone with carvings in it. One of the archaeological artifact aspects of the Viking theory is that there are these rune stones that people find, these sort of rocks with supposedly Norwegian or Scandinavian script carved into them. There's a number of them. I'm going to show you some more in a minute. None of them really have any authenticity to them, but she finds something she thinks is a rune stone known as the Weston Stone, and that eventually disappears. But she brings historians, and when the one historian she doesn't want to bring there, because her father brought this particular person to see the site. This is Justin Windsor. Justin Windsor is one of the great American historians, a scrupulous researcher, bibliographer. He runs the library at Harvard for a while. He's one of these incredibly meticulous who checks and double checks and triple checks everything. And he writes this magisterial 8-volume history of America, the first volume of which is put over almost exclusively to debunking non-Columbian discovery myths. And when even Norman Horsford thinks he's discovered discovered Leif Erikson's house, he brings Justin Windsor to look at it, because he thinks if I get this guy on board to say that I'm right, that will make everything. And so he brings Justin Windsor out to this site, and he says, "Dude, look, I found Leif Erikson's house." And Windsor looks at it and basically says, "No, you're absolutely wrong. This has nothing to do with Leif Erikson. This has nothing to do with the discovery of America. We don't even know if Leif Erikson was real. And you're just this crazy guy who thinks he's now a historian," and gives Horsford the exact opposite reaction he was hoping for. And so for the next few years, these two guys will sort of snipe at each other, calling each other names and things. But Windsor basically undermines the whole Leif Erikson story. One of the other important supposed rune stones is this is the Kensington stone, found out in the Midwest. As you can see, it's about the size of a tombstone, a gravestone, and it's got supposedly Scandinavian runic script in it. This has been debunked several times. Believers feel this is what proves that the Vikings got here. Archaeologists have long since said, this has nothing to do with any of that. It's fake. It was made in the 19th century, but it's still very popular. You'll still read about it in books about believer books about the Viking theory. The other one, this is the Newport Tower up in Rhode Island. This is another thing that believers point to say this is a Viking structure. This was built by the Vikings, and the problem is it was probably built by early English settlers, colonial settlers, and has no connection whatsoever to Vikings. And but it's still very popular. It's still there. It's hard to see from this photograph, but sort of coming away from the tower in the direction that the camera is this beautiful open grassy field, which is very popular in the summertime for picnics and things. And there's always kids running around. We were there some years ago, and I said, well, we got to go see this. And we went up there, and we're standing there, and there was a kid's birthday party going on the lawn. And unbeknownst to us, suddenly, Barney the dinosaur is there. Now, if you know what Barney looks like, I don't think Barney's as popular as he used to be, but Barney is a sort of a kid's costume of a purple dinosaur, sort of cartoony purple dinosaur. Used to be very popular amongst the the kid birthday party set. And so I'm standing there watching this, and Barney's running around in front of the Newport Tower, and all I can think of is, well, this is perfectly appropriate, because according to the Vinland sagas, the first European to see Vinland was a guy named Barney, and so it makes perfect sense. But the Newport Tower is still there. You can go see it. They put a fence around it because people used to go up to and sort of chisel off bits of it, and they don't want that to happen. But you can see it, and people still argue about whether this is a Viking thing or not. It's unlikely that it does. I'll wrap up here. The last artifact. This is the Vinland map. The Vinland map comes out, is discovered in the 1950s, and it's supposedly a map that was found in a medieval manuscript. And it is supposedly the first pictorial representation. You can see, hopefully you can see the arrow moving here. This is supposedly the first pictorial rendering of North America on a map made by Vikings. And it's extremely controversial. The original still exists. It's at the Beinecke Library at Yale. And it's been studied and studied and studied. It was bought by a benefactor, a guy named Paul Mellon, very, very wealthy, famous, guy who gave money to scholars and libraries and universities and things, big Yale benefactor. He bought it for a huge undisclosed amount of money and then donated it to Yale. It has been studied and studied over and over again. And the vast majority of historians see this fake, that it's a 20th century creation. In fact, just a couple of years ago, it was checked again. A radiometric dating was done on it, and it dates to the middle of the 20th century, so obviously it's fake. It's fascinating, though. It's got its own history. I mean, we could have spent this whole time just talking about the history of the Vinland map. But this is just another example of these odd artifacts that get associated. The thing about the Viking theory is that the Viking theory has the most physical artifacts. All these other stories about African explorers and Chinese explorers, there really are no physical bits that can be associated with it. But the Vikings got tons of this stuff. There's half a dozen rune stones. There's the site of Norumbega. There's the Vinland map. Unfortunately, none of it's real. It's all been shown to be either misidentifications of genuine things or just outright fakes. So besides being interesting and a little funny, what does it matter? Why does any of this matter? Well, the reason I think it's important, and this is sort of the point I try to make in my book, is that this is not really the story of who got here first, even though we know the Native Americans were here first. This isn't a story about who got here first. This is who got to America first. This is a story about who owns America, who gets to be called an American. What does that mean? A lot of the groups that say, this is a very ethnocentric field. Most of the people who support the Viking theory are of Scandinavian ancestry. The people who support the idea that King Abu Bakr of the Mali Empire are people of African descent. The people who support Prince Madoc are Welsh. Those who support St. Brendan are mostly Irish. It's sort of you support the person or persons from your area. You're the ones who think this. And in a lot of most of these cases, it's all about showing we are Americans too. The color of our skin might be different. The accents we speak with might be different. The places our ancestors come from might be different, but they came here first. That means we're just as much Americans. We have just as much of a right to this place as anybody else. And here we are in the early 21st century, and we are met with these waves of anti-immigrant hatred, and not just here in North America, but in the UK and in Europe. You have these, this bubbling up of hatred of immigrants, of hatred of people of color, of women, of gay people, of trans people. And that's why this story matters, because this all works into these wider important questions. It's all about who do we like, who do we not like, who gets to call themselves Americans and who don't. If you're from here, you get to call yourself an American. If you're from over there, you don't. We have a lot of, one of the things that fascinates me about the current anti-immigrant movement here in the Anglo-American world is that a lot of the biggest proponents of anti-immigrant thinking are immigrants. If you're not a native, if you can't trace your ancestry to native people here in America, you're an immigrant, period. It doesn't matter where you're from. And if you're from here, you're a legal immigrant. But if you came from this place, you're somehow an illegal immigrant. I like to tell people that I'm the proud ancestor of illegal immigrants. My maternal family came here from Ireland. My paternal family came here from Poland. And by the standards of anti-immigrant thinking today, they were all illegals. I love to tell people the story. My grandfather, my Polish grandfather, Anthony, came here in 1909 as a 9-year-old, all by himself. His family stuck him on a boat in Bremen with what little money they had to get him to America. He shows up at Ellis Island, and that classic picture of Ellis Island with the long line of people going up to the counter and the customs official, writes stuff down. And my grandfather, when he gets up to the counter, they asked him 3 questions. What's your name? Anthony Regal. Where are you from? Silesia. Are you sick? No. All right, you're in. That was the totality of his immigrant entry experience. He didn't have permission ahead of time. He just showed up and walked in. And so if it's good enough for him, it should be good enough for everybody, whether you're from Europe, the UK, Ireland, or Mexico, or wherever you come from. That should be the only criteria. But that's where this story of who discovered America, that's where it fits in. That's why it's important. You see now a lot of anti-immigrant violence with people painting like weird versions of Viking runes on their shirts and on their, getting tattoos, and we're real Americans and you're not, because my ancestors were Vikings and all the Vikings were white guys, Christian white guys. And so that's why this story is important. That's the idea I tried to get across with this, that we all have these stories about who got here first, and that's why the question becomes important. Now, finally, my shameless self-promotion part of the talk. My latest book prior to the Columbus thing, The Secret History of Jersey Devil, which I wrote with my colleague Frank Esposito, and the one before that, Searching for Sasquatch, is there. Here's the cover of this one. And I know a number of you have bought this, and I really appreciate it. And a number of you haven't, because it is outrageously expensive. That is one of the great problems we have with academic publishing. For some reason, academic publishers think they can charge like 5 times what a non-academic publisher would charge for something. I'm hoping that in 6 months or so they'll put it out in paperback and the price will drop. But there we are. If you want to contact me, if you want to watch people yelling at me for various different reasons, I'm on Twitter. There's my Twitter handle right there at Tarbosaur. I'm with the Department of History at Kean University here in New Jersey. There's our department logo, and there's the department's webpage. You can look at that. There's the department's Twitter feed. And one last time, I want to thank everybody. I know some of you traveled quite a while to get here. And no, nobody got that joke. Everybody's on the line. Okay. But I appreciate everybody who showed up, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody can unmute to say thank yous or clap.
If anybody has any questions, have at you.
So I know I've read that early 19th century or late 18th century Italian Americans made a big deal of Columbus, or wanted to make a big deal of Columbus as part of that inclusion thing that we were talking about. How much truth is there in that idea?
What do you mean?
Was it really a thing that Italian Americans, that's why they pushed?
Oh yes, definitely, because the vast majority of Italian immigrants in the 19th and early 20th century are Catholics. And this is still during the great anti-Catholic period in America.
Right.
And so, like all the other groups who are promoting their various heroes for who discovered America, the Italian American community adopts Columbus. Columbus is already sort of grandfathered in. Most people, whether you like him or not like him, most people by then accept that Columbus is discovers America. And so you get Columbus Day in America. You get the Knights of Columbus. You get all these sort of Columbus, in New York. And if you know anything about New York politics in the 19th century, there was this organization called Tammany Hall, infamously corrupt, political machine. Their original name was the Tammany and Columbus Society.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they dropped the Columbus bit and they just went with Tammany. Tammany was a Native American chief, famous, sort of heroic Native American chief. But yeah, all that stuff, Columbus, Ohio, I don't think there's a state in the Union that doesn't have at least 2 or 3 cities and towns called Columbus. So yes, that was part of that. We're gonna, this shows that we're good Americans like everybody else, and we deserve to be treated with respect along with everybody else.
Well, my Italian grandfather, who's in the Navy, who jumped ship in New York and came here illegally, thanks Columbus.
Brian, was that the same with most immigrant groups? You mentioned there was an Irish discoverer. During the Irish immigration, did the same thing occur?
Oh yeah, of course. The Irish have Saint Brendan the Navigator, who was actually one of the few of these characters who we know was a genuine person. Was Brendan, and he actually was a bit of an explorer, which is why he gets called Brendan the Navigator. He gets to the Faroe Islands. He travels around a bit in the Irish Sea and in the kind of British Isles region. So he actually does some traveling. But then later on, of all people, John Dee, the famous alchemist, is the guy who promotes not only St. Brendan, but Madoc as the true Britannic discoverers of America, because John Dee is working for Elizabeth I, and he says, if we make a big deal about St. Brendan and Madoc, that'll prove that North America belongs to Britain.
I don't know if you saw my comment in the chat.
No, I haven't looked at any of that. I'm not very good at that, talking and seeing the chat at the same time.
The first American was Virginia Dare.
Virginia Dare, thank you. Jesus, how did I not know that? Yes, Virginia Dare. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But if the Vinland sagas are correct, Snorri Herlufsson was actually the first European born here, and then
What about John Cabot?
Well, what's interesting is during sort of the post-revolutionary period, in between the what in American history is known as the Revolutionary period and the period that we call the Early Republic, there's a number of people who are talking about who discovered America, and the sort of scholarly types that get involved in this, they think John Cabot should be the one to get credit, not Columbus, because they said, well, Columbus, yeah, he's here and all that, but he never comes to North America. But Cabot does come to North America, so we should give him credit for discovering the United States.
So a real person?
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
In my book, I call John Cabot the merchant from Venice. I have a painful addiction to puns, and wherever I could use them, I did. The chapter on I didn't really get to talk about here. We can do another talk in the future about the artifact and the inscription hunters working out west. I call them the Stone Temple Pilots, and a lot of people don't get that, but there's a whole belief that biblical giants, the Nephilim, somehow trudged across the Atlantic Ocean from Africa, from the Middle East, and they actually come here first. And I called that part of the book, They Might Be Giants. So I get a little carried away sometimes because Cabot was from Venice. Yep. So.
Yep. I also put, for everybody who didn't see in chat, there's a link to the picture of the chess piece, if anybody wants to see.
Oh, good. Yeah, Norumbega Tower.
Yeah, and there was also, I got it from an article by somebody from WBUR, and it's funny, she doesn't seem to be a historian, but she's got all the same information that you got. I wondered if you knew.
Yeah, well, I found online a couple of years ago a postcard, an original postcard of Norumbega Tower, and that's the picture that's in the book.
Yeah, the person who wrote the article, I just wondered if you knew her. Megan McGinnis?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I apologize if she.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't say she's a historian or anything like that, so I'm just curious how she got the information.
Right.
Yeah.
So this information about Columbus has been really, getting more and more out there, at least for a decade. I'm sure probably longer, but why does it persist? I mean, it's an Italian lobby, one thing, but does it have anything to do with America's inability to deal with its reality? And
I think that's part of it. I think the 21st century cynic in me says the reason why Columbus is still popular, he's a white male Christian.
As an Italian, and I'm sure Linda could probably attest to this, Columbus just becomes so big a part of Italian American culture in the United States. I mean, he's seen almost as a saint, in Italian American culture. So it's going to be very hard to shake that from anybody.
A couple of years ago, I did an op-ed here in New Jersey, the big newspaper in New Jersey, the Star Ledger. And I did an op-ed for Columbus Day, and where I basically said, it wasn't even that, it wasn't anti-Columbus. I simply said, here are some of these other myths and legends about who discovered America. And maybe we should have a Madoc Day. Maybe we should have a King Abubakar Day, and maybe we should have a Wei Shen Day. And this guy wrote to me, sent me this long typed letter. You could always hear him yelling into his typewriter from on the letterhead of an Italian American Association. As soon as I saw that, as soon as I opened up the letter, I was, oh boy, I'm in trouble now. And the guy, how do you ever become a professor? You know, Kean University should be ashamed to have you on the faculty. You're an idiot. You're this and you're that. And the last thing he says is, and I can tell that by your op-ed that you hate Italians.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really a
How can I
big
hate
part of
I love pasta. How can I hate Italians?
it, but it's such a big part of Italian American identity that
Yeah, it really is.
it really is. Yeah. So
Are there no other Italians in American history?
oh yeah, and ones who did a lot better stuff.
Yeah, second to Columbus is usually Marconi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Marconi invented radio. The
Mhm.
problem is Marconi does not invent radio.
Right.
He invents wireless telegraphy.
Right.
In fact, Marconi tried to kill radio because it was interfering with his business selling wireless telegraphy.
Mhm.
And it was a number of other guys who, you know, sort of separately are working on bits and pieces, which finally come together to create radio. But Marconi really doesn't have anything to do with it. But somehow,
Yeah.
you know, he's got the better PR people.
Yep.
You know, and he gets, you know, it's like Galileo doesn't really do. I mean, Galileo uses the telescope. He improves the telescope, and he sees the mountains on the moon and the moons of Jupiter. And he does all that stuff. He doesn't not do it. But what most people don't know is there were a number of other people doing the same thing at the same time. And while historians of science know this, the general public, they only think about Galileo. And what I always tell my students is Galileo had the better public relations guy. And so we always think of Galileo for doing this. But that's the same sort of thing with Columbus and with Marconi. They have good public relations. And so that's the average person on the street. You know, who's Guillermo Marconi? Oh, he invented radio. You know, what did Columbus do? Columbus discovered America.
Right. Yeah, it's like the Edison thing, you know. So yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Oh, don't even get me started on Edison.
That's for another
Oh,
talk, another
What
day.
a horrible human being Edison was.
Yep. But he invented everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Someone did in his workhouses.
This is Holly. I have a quick question for you about Columbus.
Okay.
I mean, I had heard that he was actually quite brutal, that he tried to convert all of the tribes in the Caribbean to Catholicism, and if they didn't convert, then he murdered them. Are those stories true?
Yes.
Okay.
Short answer, yes. Yeah, no, he was the whole undertaking to find the easier route to Asia. It was not about discovery. It was not about the grand human adventure. It was about making money. It was a business deal. And he gets to what he thinks are the sort of barrier islands to either Japan or India. And he had read in Marco Polo, who does get to India. He probably didn't get to China. Marco Polo is another guy we got a lot of problems with. But he gets to India, and in the travels, Marco Polo's travels, he says that the people of India, they're sort of dark skinned. They're not as light as Europeans, they're not as dark as Africans, they're sort of somewhere in between. So when Columbus gets to the Caribbean, what does he find? He finds sort of dark-skinned people, not as dark as Africans, not as light as Europeans, and he thinks, boom, I made it, I'm in Asia. And yeah, he treats the Taino and the Arawak people horribly. He brings some of the Arawaks back to Spain as slaves. One of the first things he tells Isabella is, we can make a fortune off of this place just selling slaves. You know, and he on the second, or I think at the third voyage, he brings a bunch of Europeans as settlers with him to set up, you know, which is interesting because he thinks it's in India. So he's going to bring a bunch of Europeans to start a settlement in India. But he treats them so horribly that they complain to the Spanish crown, and Columbus gets, initially Isabella makes Columbus governor general of what they're calling the East Indies. And Columbus behaves so poorly, even to other Europeans, that Isabella, yanks him out of the job of governor, almost throws him in prison. She doesn't, in the end, she doesn't. But she strips him of all this stuff because he's such a horrible guy. Some of you have heard me say this before. It's all fun and games until the historian shows up.
Two things about what you're saying, Brian. Remember that Marco Polo brought us spaghetti. So that's,
Don't tell an Italian that.
That's right. I mean, again, that's another thing about Italian culture is Marco Polo brought us spaghetti.
Spaghetti,
and, as bad as
and
Columbus
syphilis.
and as bad as Columbus was, and he was bad. I mean, that's the way most Europeans treated Native people anyway.
Right, yeah. He wasn't that, he was awful, but his awfulness really wasn't out of step with the rest of European culture.
Yeah, I mean, when the
one of the-
Spaniards came, they, again,
Yeah.
trying to convert everybody to Catholicism, and if
Right.
they didn't, we'll torture and kill you until
The
you.
reason why Columbus is important is not because he discovers America.
Mhm.
It's because he gets there and gets back.
Mhm.
You can't just get somewhere. You have to get back to where you come from to tell people that you've gotten to this place.
Right.
And Columbus's importance is that when he comes back, he says, I got to India, the floodgates open.
Mhm.
And you just get this, this train of ships coming over, full of conquistadors and settlers and, colonial abusers and imperialists, because they think we've now got a quick way to India. And it doesn't take too long before they realize, well, this isn't Asia at all. This is someplace we Europeans weren't really familiar with, but so much the better, because now we can exploit it even more.
Yep. And they had the better weapons.
Well, sure. And they bring the horses over and,
Yep.
Before we go on too much longer, if I haven't already, I want to say thank you, Brian, so much for.
Always a pleasure.
I think I
Us too.
read your op-ed about Columbus in
Mhm.
J.com, and I think maybe down at the bottom it might have said you were working on a book,
Yes.
and my brain immediately went, Brian's working on a new book. So, and yes, is the book more of a textbook?
No, not really. It's I don't write textbooks.
Even the Kindle version is $40.
Yeah, I know. I cannot apologize more for that.
No, it's not.
Authors
Oh, look,
authors,
Sheila has one. How thick
authors
is it?
don't get to price their books.
How thick is it, Sheila? How is it?
It's pretty weighty. It's
300
it's really
pages.
nice, gorgeous,
Oh, 3?
and
Yes.
it's well worth the money.
Yes.
I am a
Love it.
delightful author.
Yes.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you to Brian. Thank you for your friends who came
Thanks to everybody for coming down.
today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.